y'all? It's your co-host with the most, CJ, and we're coming at you with a little bit of a different episode this week, Duality, episode 5. I will have Marco joining me this week via Zoom, as well as another guest. His name is Murad. Link to both of their Instagrams in the description, and we hope you guys enjoy.
Meeting is being recorded by the host. Oh yeah, for sure.
I forgot to click that when we started. it's recording from the camera in here, though.
Yeah,
so
the first thing they're gonna see is Marco reading the message.
That's true. Right? Yeah.
Those OG iPhones, though, man. Remember, like fucking iPod? They were fucking built like Game Boys, man, back in the day.
But, dude, see, here's the thing. Like, the way they pulled that move into the phone industry was brilliant because everyone had like an iPod Nano, an iPod Shuffle, and then everyone wanted to get the iPod Touch. And then all of a sudden, it was basically a phone without the phone part.
Before that, the BlackBerry had like a little keyboard, and there were a few other phones that came after it that had the keyboard without the touchpad. They just had basically a phone-sized keyboard that either slid out from underneath them or just had them under the screen. But that was the revolutionary thing about the iPhones is that it had a touch screen. And I believe Apple, I don't think Apple has invented the touch screen, but the application of it in terms of application of it in the phones, I think that was them. I think the patent is it was Apple's patent, I believe. In the modern iteration of it, I think there are some primitive ways that they would use the touch screen, what could be called the touch screen technology way back in the 60s or 70s even. But to be able to use it on a device with that, and I think the pinch zoom, or what do they call it, that was another big feature that came with it, where you weren't, what was funny with the touch screens, the phone started getting bigger because before they were getting smaller. Before it was like, oh, okay, I have the smallest phone, I'm the coolest guy, and it was the razors, right? They're like the thinnest. And then once the phone came out that the whole phone is a screen, then it's like, oh, okay, I can watch movies on this thing. Let me get it bigger. And now you're looking at things damn near the size of a tablet. So it's an interesting evolution, right? If they figure out a way. If they figure out a way to holographically project that onto a surface or somewhere, I could see the devices start getting smaller again because you're no longer.
Think about it, man. They got watches now, bro. It literally went full fucking Star Trek, Iron, whatever. Now I'm a type with the wrist. You remember Rangers, Morphin Time and shit. You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy, dude.
Yeah.
You guys remember the
you can
Google
talk
Glass?
on your watch, dude. Like, you know that, Murad? Like, now, CJ, y'all know that. Or you could talk. People like, what's up? What's going on? You know what I mean?
They even tried to take it a step further. It failed, but they tried to do the Google Glasses. You guys remember that? Remember seeing ads?
I remember that, yeah.
Like 5 years ago. That was another thing that was on the killed by Google page. But the Google Glasses, it was a cool concept, really bad execution, and I just don't think the technology is there. I mean, the concept was like you could control your phone, right, your iPhone, from your glasses. But I mean, just think about that in practice, trying to walk down the street and messages are popping up in your glasses, and like it's not enough FOV, it's not enough space, and it didn't work,
The neural plants are going to be the future, bro. They're going to make everything neuro, man, where you can plug like something right here and shit, and you can communicate telepathic with that.
I think they have technology that allows computers to track the eye movement. I think they do it for like paralyzed people, and they're able to the computer is able to detect what the eyes are looking at. I'm not 100% sure how that works, but to that extent, I mean, the technology wasn't there yet, but I feel like it can either jump straight to like the Neuralink and whatever Elon Musk was talking about, where you just practically control with your mind. And that's the thing. It's like with every time you have technology, and to me, it's not the technology that worries me. It's the people, because even right now, right? Like there's so many people who talk about, oh, AI taking over and this and that. AI is not really taking over. You're giving everything to AI because you're looking at it as like, okay, let me do spell check. I don't need to learn how to spell. I have computer do it for me. Now
Yeah.
it's like, oh, I don't need to know how to what's that commercial pops up on YouTube? Grammarly. It's like I don't need to know how to write. This AI will write for me. And now there is Chat GPT or whatever it's called. Now it's like, okay, well, I'll let this thing talk for me. And what people forget is how they say use it or lose it. If you're not
Yeah.
using it, if you're outsourcing it, if you're letting somebody else or something else take over those functions, guess what? You unlearn how to do it. And we already are at the point where younger generations can't spell worth of shit. They can't write, they can't form coherent sentences. And with that, they're losing ability to think slowly, the degradation in thinking, if you look at
Nowadays,
it.
they can graduate
Well,
from
if we
college.
keep outsourcing that to technology, the thinking is going to be done for us.
Yeah.
What are you saying, Marco?
No, I didn't mean to cut you off, man. I was talking while you were talking. I didn't mean to overtalk you, but no, I was just saying, man. Like, it's pretty much is our. It's like now people can graduate now without having any kind of reading comprehension. They don't even have to read. Know how to read and get a diploma.
The standards are getting lower and lower, and really the interesting thing about it is humans, again, like we were just talking, with advancement in technology, most people will try to put in the lesser effort, as little as possible, in order to achieve the same result. And the technology allows them to put in less and less and less effort. It's pretty much like lowering the requirements. So like you said, right now they don't need to know comprehension. I mean, I look at education system in America, and one of the craziest things I see is, for one, a lot of testing is done with a multiple choice or true or false format. You effectively have um, possible answers given to you,
Give,
where you have
give,
to
yeah.
come within certain approximation of it, but you have options that you choose between, right? You don't have to actually sit down and think for yourself and show. Like, that's why back home we had all the examination done in an essay format. You read the question, they give you 15 minutes. In 15 minutes, you pretty much have to give a presentation. Here, I came here and university was so easy for me because presentations were such a big deal. You had to, you were given like 2 weeks in advance, maybe a week, and a week
Do
people
you
were
think
complaining that it's a short
you had to
notice.
go? Do you think, Murad? Do you think you had to go to that though because you were more kind of under a dictatorship rather than being the spoiled capitalist country that
it's
America
it's
is?
not it's not that the dictators never
But
really
well, hold on, but we take our education for granted here in America, though, man. They seem to be a
and
forced over where you're at.
but see, that's not the remnant of that's not a function of a dictatorship, because if anything, the dictators don't want you to think. That
Yeah.
Soviet education system was actually a remnant from the competition they had with America during the Cold War and everything, when it was pretty much the institution, the education system was set up to compete with Americans. Soviets go to space, the Americans go to the moon. There's competition there's competition in space, there's competition in manufacturing, there's competition in sports. So you're looking at all of that, and that's when it was designed. And then when the Cold War was over, in America, it kind of fell off because they didn't need to compete anymore, because they were like, okay, we're sitting pretty. So for a while, the self-esteem movement took place. And that's where I usually draw kind of like the turning point for a lot of issues that we're having today, is when people started attributing failures to low self-esteem. So they started creating the programs that were aimed at raising self-esteem. And I mean, I could have told people that was a bad idea if I was alive back then, but in general, you start seeing a lot of egomania going on nowadays, where it's all about me, 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 and at the same time, the
And that's
standards are
the
getting
result,
lower
though. But
and
that's the
lower and
result,
lower.
though, isn't it?
Yeah, well, you tell people that they should be feeling good about themselves regardless of what they're doing, where they are in life, and they will essentially, you dropping the standards for them. And you say, hey, you don't need to work hard to feel good about yourself. You just need to feel good about yourself for the sake of feeling good about yourself. And all your problems are because you're not feeling good enough about yourself. So then you're starting to remove obstacles from people, and that's where everything goes sideways, because naturally, CJ would know about that, evolution, right? You have biological evolution. Species advance through challenges. It's always survival of the fittest, which is basically the survival of the most adaptable. When the new challenges present themselves, if you cannot adapt, you die. Animals don't have they don't have medicine. They don't have modern medicine. How do they survive? How do they survive all the diseases that they are ridden with diseases? What they do? Because the ones who could not survive died off. And it is very callous to think about it this way. And we as humans have allowed technology to replace that. So what do we do now is like, oh, okay, we'll take a vaccine and you build immunity to it, but your immunity is not necessarily on a genetic level. I mean, it may be on a genetic level in a sense where you are now after being vaccinated against, let's say, polio and other things that, dangerous diseases. But can you pass that immunity to children? Can you pass that immunity later down, or will they also require vaccination in order to stay away from those diseases?
Well,
so that becomes a big issue.
You'll definitely need, if that's how you're going about it, you'll definitely need to get your children vaccinated for the same disease, same whatnot, because it isn't genetic. It doesn't transfer through genes, because with your, what you would call innate immune system, the immune system that you're born with, like the program of diseases that your body already has from your parents, that's what gets passed down, right? And then your adaptive immune system is obviously to each person, right? It's what you come down with in life. It's new diseases that maybe your parents haven't, or new strains that your parents haven't encountered, that you then build up a genetic code for your white blood cells to then go and use. And the problem with a vaccine is that it's almost like a classroom. It's very, very controlled, and it's a dead or weakened strand of the virus. And, it is essentially like a classroom in the sense that it's almost like studying the theory of something. It's like telling someone, hey, riding a bike, you're always going to ride with training wheels, right? Instead of actually making them just go down the road on two wheels and figure out that whole balance thing as a kid. If you always give a kid training wheels, he is never, ever going to be able to actually ride a bike, right? And that's kind of what I see like school as personally. It's like they always have like such a harsh set of training wheels on. Then when people they do well in school and they do well in university, they come out and they absolutely faceplant and they don't know what to do. They don't know what to do because there's no PowerPoint to memorize to tell you what's going to happen, tomorrow or the next month or the next day. It's all like, can you actually think on your feet? Are you actually intelligent to take a situation, think about it critically, maybe learn from it if you messed up, and then keep going forward?
There are people who are book smart and there are people who have common sense. Not everyone who's book smart, not like college kids, right? Murad, you both know, you both have been to college, so y'all know a lot of smart motherfuckers in college who have no common sense.
Well, and it's not just about that. Even on a college level, they're oftentimes they might be knowledgeable, and this is what education system here awards is knowing, even at the very early level.
If you haven't applied anything or have experienced anything, I mean, that knowledge is good, but it's like reading about fighting versus actually.
Exactly. You hit it on the head. Exactly.
Problem begins at a very early age, even with the kids. How do their parents are showing that, oh, my kid is smart, he knows ABCs, he can count to whatever, he knows all the US presidents, he knows all the 50 states, all of that stuff. It was like, what you're saying is your kid is smart because your kid can memorize. Memorization is not really it's not that valuable of a skill, especially in an era where things get recorded so easily. I mean, maybe back in the day, maybe back when people couldn't read, right? Reading was big skill, and you could be like, okay, look, this guy's intelligent because he can read. And then they learn how to read, but then there is no convenient way to store things down. And so then it becomes like, okay, I memorized it, so I know a lot of things, and you have to go dig in an encyclopedia for that. But now with Google at your fingertips, it's no longer an exceptional skill. And when you look at kids who were praised for memorizing stuff, they have no analytical ability. And so all throughout the education system, they are rewarded primarily on their ability to memorize things and pretty much apply that memory.
Well, nowadays,
but in fact, real world is more about thinking analytically through things.
Yeah.
But the one subject that teaches you on almost like a subliminal, like fundamental level, the analytical skills is math, and math is despised in American among American students. There's so many people.
Look at Common Core right now, Murad. That shit is, I mean, it's unintelligible. It does not make any sense. Like, at least, why wouldn't you just, the way I was taught was just, hey, you put the two numbers, right? And then you put the number on top.
All right, go easy on math tards. All right.
What do you mean math tards? Hey,
both of you wise motherfuckers, man.
Well, you don't want to see Common Core because you can't. For the life of me, I can't even figure it out. I look at it, I'm like, this makes no sense. It's so many extra steps. Just do the math straight through. But Murad's absolutely right. Like math, and I'd have to say behind that second, reading is like despised. I'll never forget, like teachers, especially in elementary school, always used to say, when you'd sit there and you'd use like your calculator to figure out something as opposed to just trying to use your times tables or writing them out, they'd always say like, oh, you're never going to have a calculator, in your pocket in real life the entire time. And, it's almost it is a great example of how education is, like, in my opinion, the format is very outdated because not only do we have a calculator in our pockets at all time, we have, just like Murad was saying, a computer more powerful than the one that sent man to the moon in our pocket at all times. Now, I really wish education in general would stop essentially saying, hey, you can't use your phone for anything. You can't use technology for anything. Like, we're going to say we have updated classes because we have smart boards now, but the methods are all the same. It's like, no, you need to realize that everyone now has a smartphone. So how do you incorporate that? And how do we incorporate that in with the lesson, as well as actually making things applicable, right?
Teachers are known for being activists now, man. Fucking kids don't even want to.
Well, it's not even just that. It's the people are so easily fooled because people have no ability to see when they're being deceived because they cannot form those connections. They cannot think of an issue analytically. To them, like a lot of people say, is like, oh, this makes sense to me, or they'll talk about common sense. But if you think about it, it's, just because something makes sense on the surface is not necessarily make it true. I mean, there are people who will follow something because it sounds good or because it rhymes. So you look at people like that, is like, are you really making life decisions because some sort of a proverb or saying rhymes and it sounds cool? Is like, you can't do that. You can't do that. You really have to analyze things. And people are not very analytical. And that is part of the reason why people resort to emotions. Very silly example of a logical fallacy called post hoc ergo propter hoc, where you look at the chain of events and you say, oh, okay, because this happened after this, therefore this is caused by this. Let's say I wake up every morning at 4:00. I wake up every morning and then the sun comes up, and that is a correlation. Let's say I've done that my entire life that I remember, and I can certainly say that, hey, every time I wake up, the sun wakes up, the sun comes up. Therefore, I conclude that I caused the sun to go up, which is obviously very silly. But if you look at like modern day examples, for example, you will look at somebody's presidency and let's say gas prices. So you can be like, oh, okay, well, so-and-so got in power and then the gas prices went up. Therefore, we assume that that president is causing the power prices to go up. Presidents usually don't have a lot of power and a lot of influence on the gas prices. Now, that is not to say that just because there is no logical connection between
it
those
is when they
two.
start signing a bunch of random bullshit.
Probably.
Well, that's a separate issue altogether. So for somebody to say, for example, hey, look at Biden's policy, energy policy. Look at the things he signed into law as soon as he took office, and how that affected whether it be pipelines, whether it be some bureaucracies that were imposed on the oil companies, et cetera, et cetera. If somebody were to present that argument and really illustrate the point that Biden's policies are what caused the increase in gas prices, along with other contributing factors, yes, that would be a valid argument. But to simply say like, oh, okay, Biden took office then, and then gas prices went up, well, then that's simply logical fallacy, right?
He needs to
And
start his speeches with, and don't forget, eat your Lucky Charms.
Well, you see,
yeah, I missed that part, but
You missed that part where they were saying that Lucky Charms is more healthier than steak?
yeah, because they're trying to convince people to eat like cereal for dinner now. That's why.
No, don't forget to eat your Lucky Charms, to eat their Lucky Charms.
Absolutely, it's ridiculous. Don't even get me started on the government's definition of health. I mean,
My bad, man. But I just figured, like, it's something you probably say. Eat your Lucky Charms.
Marco, that is an issue. I mean, like, I'll go off on a little tangent, then we'll pull it back. That is an issue that has been persisted throughout. Democrat, Republicans is essentially the government's definition of what is healthy, right? When you had like Obama come in, they designated pizza, cafeteria pizza, as a vegetable, Marco.
What? Wait, what?
Yeah, because it has tomato sauce.
Murad, I missed that, bro. I didn't even know that shit.
well,
that was the whole.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised, to be honest.
That was the whole push. You guys remember when the Obamas first got into the White House, the whole push for kids to be active and more healthy? That's what one of those things led to. It was, we need to reform school lunches. So all they did was they reclassified pizza as a vegetable. Now all of a sudden, the kids are getting their daily vegetable intake. It's a slice of pizza, but because it has tomato sauce on it, it's vegetable.
It's got tomato sauce in it. It's tomato.
Exactly. So it's a vegetable.
Hey, and the crust is made mostly of flour, which is wheat, which is a plant. So there you go.
I think not to cut you off, but like, I think it all gets to the same point, kind of like what we've been circling around here about how education is just so misguided. I mean, like, you look at the health thing, you look at the actual classroom, and then you look at the misapplications of everything.
Don't ever let me catch you saying that there's there's two genders only, CJ. Don't you ever.
Dude, are you kidding me? There's no. Okay, I'll give you the rundown. I'll give you the rundown for that on the show, because I don't think I've done that. There are only two genders. You want to know why?
Biology is racist.
Well, listen to this. The only form of a third gender in biology, or intersexuality, as we would call it, would be a hermaphrodite.
From hermaphrodite.
That is something that is a genetic error. That is something that naturally occurs. Here's the problem. Due to the biological species concept, that is how biologists go out into the field and classify species out in the field. You have to really two simple things. In order to be included as part of an already defined species, you have to be one of the two genders, so that pretty much right there, and then B, you have to essentially be able to reproduce with one of the other two genders and create a prolific offspring, an offspring that is fertile. Okay, so like a great example of something where this doesn't hold up is a mule. You get a horse, right? And you get I forgot the other thing that they mix it with.
Donkey,
thank you. And then you mix those two and you get a mule, right? The mule is sterile. You can't put two mules together and they'll make another mule. You need to get the horse and the donkey, and that is actually classified in biology as a subspecies of either a horse or a donkey, which is a mule. Okay, yep. It's not even a species on its own. By our own definition, in terms of how we classify things out in the field, the only third gender is actually classified as a subspecies of whatever species it thinks it belongs to. The reason why is because naturally hermaphrodites cannot reproduce.
a question I wanted to ask because there is not so much division, but two ways to look at the genders, right? One of them obviously was by primary sexual characteristics, which, you know, genitalia, stuff like that, which is kind of just like the way genes express themselves, right? The phenotype. They look at also genotype, obviously, what kind of chromosomes you have. I've heard another interesting take on it in that they are looking at the gametes that the organism is producing. So they're basically saying, is your body producing eggs or sperm? So they're looking at that that way, and it's interesting to me. And I'm not sure if there are any discrepancies between the two. To my knowledge, it's pretty consistent that if you do have a healthy male and XY chromosome, double X chromosome, you're female. So you would probably be producing the gametes that relate to that. But the intersex ones, right? So you have, like you mentioned, the hermaphrodites cannot reproduce. There are multiple, I believe, on a genetic level, abnormalities in the in that chromosomes where, you know, XXY or XYY and whatever else there is. But there, in those cases, I've heard biologists refer to, and I'm not sure what the scientific term is, but refer to the gametes that they're producing. If you are producing sperm, you're a male. If you're producing eggs, you're a female. And essentially, that's another way to look at it. From what I understand, the main argument is on the left is that gender is a social construct while sex is biological, although some even try to argue that the sex is also not a binary. But all it does to me is, okay, so let's say you found a loophole effectively. If you're looking at, oh my God, this is based on gender, but gender is the construct, the purpose behind that segregation still doesn't change. So all it will bring to is that the bathrooms and the sport activities, for example, will be segregated based on your genetic makeup. Why go through that hassle when we can just cut the shit, right? And just get to the point. Some of you are men, some of you are women. There are differences, biological differences between the two of you. They don't always hold up. I mean, there are probably some women who can kick men's ass. There's a boxer, trans male boxer, who went from being a woman and to becoming a man, and I think won their first and maybe only fight. But regardless, there are exceptions to every case. But in essence, yes, can we just cut the crap and accept that predominantly men will dominate women in athletics? Many women do not want to be in the company of men when they're undressing. The longer we let it drag on, the more violent that separation is going to be. Because when it's on the terms where it's kind of like a person, right? When a person, something bothers a person, and they will let it out, and they will let people know, it goes away, it resolves itself, and it doesn't go anywhere. But if that person keeps it bottled up, and that person is holding on to their own stuff, and the longer they decide to let it drag on, the longer they decide to let it go and kind of pull it and pull it and pull it, but the longer we put it off, the more violent that confrontation is going to be, because at some point something's got to give. And when it gives, that's my concern. That's how we're looking at revolutions. Revolutions are always like, okay, they pushed it too far and something had to give, and it never ends well for either parties. It becomes a war, and we are heading in that direction as a nation, to the point where it's not going to be resolved peacefully. It's something is going to have to give, and it will probably involve either violence or legislation that will affect people in a very
tremendously way. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's actually kind of a good tie-in to what we're going to close this little meeting off on, which is what I originally sent both of y'all. Women from the ages of 25 to 45 are predicted to be single, 50% of them by the age. And we're not just talking about single, like they're single then and they're going to be married later. We're talking long-term single.
Yeah. Now I want to get, now hold on. I want to get more into this.
Well, hold on. Let me pull it back.
Oh, I'm gonna have to go,
think,
man. But I just wanted
that's
to
right. Yeah, go ahead.
say, man, I really want to I want to get into this conversation with Murad more about that topic. You know, um, I just think it'd be a great topic to discuss because these are statistical facts you're saying, and
Well,
I think how a
let
lot
me
of them are
let
okay
me
with
just let me
this.
just give you this. I think that everything literally that we've spoken about has a lot to do with it. I mean, we've spoken a lot about education. Education is essentially government controlled, government fed, at least in a Western society. And on top of that, that's where feminism, third wave feminism, essentially is taught. And Murad even touched on the fact of how essentially social justice movements are often kind of hijacked. And I believe that that's done a lot through education.
BLM's a perfect example. BLM was hijacked.
Perfect example. And what I feel is that, especially for this generation, that statistic of women 50% being single, long-term single, is absolutely true by the year 2030. I think it has to do a lot with how divided we are. It has to do with how the whole divide and conquer strategy goes, and the fact that now men are starting to hate women, women hate men, right? And then in between that, now you also have like things such as racism. You have things just bare discrimination, whereas two people who have the same skin color look at one another and say, "I'm better because," right? And all of that, in my opinion, is influenced through education. You look at what's one of the most cliquey social environments you can get into. It's high school.
Yeah.
It's college. Everyone is hanging around in a certain, like I went to high school, went to college prep high school in New York City, Murad. And it did not surprise me when I heard in college the statistic that New York City schools are amongst the most segregated in the country. And I'll never forget, even at a college prep school, I'll never forget. Of course, I was always part of the Motley crew, but you look around the cafeteria, it's not even minorities sitting with minorities anymore. It is the Dominicans specifically sitting with the Dominicans, the Puerto Ricans specifically sitting with the Puerto Ricans. We even had this thing going on in school where the dark-skinned black dudes would say, "I'm team field slave," and the light-skinned black dudes would say, "I'm team house slave." So then you started having like the light-skinned African American dudes sitting with each other, and then you had the dark-skinned African American dudes sitting with. It was ridiculous how people would literally, you just put them in a room, you don't put any restrictions on, and how they self-segregate. And I think that that's because of a lot of the lessons that are taught through education.
And
What do you guys think?
you know what you know why I think that is actually and you will notice that dynamic throughout nations even, and I believe there were some experiments done in psychology when they put students together and they said they had separate groups, and one of them they said, "Oh, you will take a test on paper and we'll let you go," and the other group they said, "We will administer some experiments and they will be slightly painful, but you know you're not going to be in danger, etc., etc." The students in a group where the situation was non-threatening, they were spread out throughout the class and they were minding their own business, doing their own thing. The group that was anticipating a stressful event because they said, "Oh, you will be painful," they started banding together and they started kind of like finding comfort near each other, and they were found to be congregating in the same area, talking to each other, be a lot more social. You will also see that in nations that are poor. You will have a strong sense of community in poorer nations because they know they need each other. You will see a very similar dynamic even in US, in the like out in the country where people live far apart and there's usually not a Walmart for like 10 miles, and they know that they may need to rely on their neighbor if something happens. So people are more friendly to each other. They're more willing to help each other. You look at people when they live with each other, like look at a big city. You have everything at your disposal. Everything you need is available to you, and people don't care about each other. And they're not going to care about each other until something happens. And we saw that a lot through COVID. And COVID, even though they told people to stay apart from each other, oftentimes there'll be people like, hey, I need help with this, I need help with this, and people started kind of talking to each other more because they were afraid. And when people don't have that fear, a lot of times what happens is like, oh, I don't need other people, like just basic tribalism, right? We're looking at tribalism, and you know, people who will gather together because they share something in common, whether they vote for the same party or they share same culture or skin color or something else. You'll see a lot of that with foreigners when they come to America and they see somebody, they hear somebody speaking their language, they're like, oh my God, are you this, that, and the other?
Right, it's an immediate connection.
Yeah, you're looking for that connection because you may need it.